Dollar prowls just below highs as euro gasps for fuel. Singapore. The dollar began the week nudging down from multi-year highs, with a hotter-than-forecast inflation studying in New Zealand lending modest help to the Kiwi, even though fears approximately Europe's gasoline supply positioned a cap on greenback selling. The dollar has soared this year thanks to a mixture of growing U.S. hobby prices and wobbling economies in Europe and China. It pushed above parity at the euro for the primary time in almost 20 years, closing week earlier than easing back. The euro last offered $1.00955 and the yen, which has tumbled approximately 17% this year, steadied at 138.37, consistent with dollar. The New Zealand dollar and the Aussie inched higher after inflation surged to a three-decade high in New Zealand. Traders are maintaining their breath beforehand of Thursday, when gasoline is meant to renew flowing through the Nord Stream pipe from Russia to Germany after a shutdown for scheduled renovation. MKTS, glob, if that doesn't manifest, that would be a very terrible factor for quite a few currencies, said Joseph Capurso, head of international economics at Commonwealth Bank of Australia (OTC), CMWAY, with the euro likely to be the most important loser and the dollar a beneficiary. The uncertainty is overshadowing a European Central Bank assembly, additionally due on Thursday, in which policymakers are predicted to start off Europe's trekking cycle with a 25 foundation point (BP) increase. Adding to headwinds for the Eurozone is a political crisis in Italy, after Prime Minister Mario Draghi tendered his resignation last week, following failure to acquire assist from coalition birthday party the Five Star Movement over his plan to fight hovering costs. Over in Asia, markets are keenly looking China's Imperative Bank Assembly on Wednesday and the Bank of Japan's on Thursday. The silver lining is that China does no longer currently face impending or heightened inflationary pressures, which permits the coverage makers to pace to its easing bias to aid the recuperation, stated Peiqin Liu, China economist at NatWest Markets. However, as the hawkish Fed and China's deleveraging coverage stance both restrict the PBOC's room to cut charges aggressively or consecutively, we nonetheless anticipate monetary easing to be the primary coverage lever in H2. In the spot market, the onshore yuan closing modified arms at 6.7468 per dollar, having recovered a touch from a two-month low of 6.77 hit Friday. The offshore yuan stood at 6.756. Similarly, no adjustments are expected from the BOJ, which is anticipated to hold its ultra-easy guidelines. That means greater pain for the beleaguered yen. Hike expectations firmed a touch bit in Australia and New Zealand after statistics displaying New Zealand's inflation hit a three-decade excessive last sector become published on Monday. At 7.3%, year-on-year fee increase beat expectancies, lifted two-year swap rates nearly 10 basis factors and raised the Kiwi through 0.5% to a one-week high of $0.6191. It ultimate traded $0.61695. The Australian dollar rose 0.3% to $0.6804. AUD. The U.S. Greenback Index became steady at 107.86, marginally decreased than last week's two-decade excessive of 109.290, even though few seem willing but to name a peak to the greenback's gains. The Federal Reserve meets later in July and is expected to raise the benchmark U.S. hobby fee with the aid of 75 bits per second. Even although this is extra conservative than the 100 BP hike markets had priced in at one factor remaining weak, it's far nevertheless pretty a stiff boom. There has been a fixation with how the greenback is poised to weaken, analysts at HSBC mentioned in an Outlook file which as an alternative raised the financial institution's dollar forecasts extensively. There has been an excessive amount of interest paid to the greenback's frailties, however no longer sufficient to the increasing ones elsewhere, that are inflicting the greenback to be overvalued. Global increase is slowing and the downside dangers are intensifying. That's USD fantastic. This greenback bull run is not over, but